The night was unusually quiet for late October 1918. A thick, rolling fog had settled over the town, curling through streets and alleyways like living smoke. Lanterns cast only faint, wavering circles of light, barely piercing the grey haze. 4 officers, each experienced and steady under pressure, were called to investigate strange sightings near the old railway station on the outskirts of town. Residents had reported fleeting shadows darting between the tracks, and some swore they heard whispers that carried on the wind, words no human could have spoken. The officers mounted their horses, the sound of hooves muffled by the damp earth, and rode toward the station, unaware that this night would mark the last anyone saw of them. As they approached the tracks, the fog thickened unnaturally, so dense it seemed to absorb sound. Their lanterns flickered as if fighting against an invisible current, and the familiar landscape became distorted and surreal. Trees loomed like dark sentinels, their twisted branches stretching out like grasping fingers. Each officer called out to one another, voices tight with unease, but their words were swallowed almost immediately by the mist. Something about the fog felt deliberate, almost sentient, as if it were aware of their presence and bending to obscure them from the world. Then came the first sign that something was terribly wrong. One of the horses shied violently, its muscles tensing as it refused to step forward. The officer holding the reins tried to coax it, but the animal backed away from a spot that, to the men, appeared empty. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, vibrating through the fog and into their chests. It was a sound they could neither name nor locate, a resonance that set their nerves on edge. Shadows seemed to flicker at the corners of their vision, always moving just out of reach, and each officer began to feel the gnawing sensation of being watched, though nothing visible could be found. Minutes stretched into an eternity as they continued, every step through the fog more disorienting than the last. Paths they thought familiar twisted into unrecognizable angles. The railway tracks seemed to stretch endlessly, disappearing into darkness that was heavier than night itself. One officer reached for his whistle, intending to signal the others, but when he blew, the sound came out distorted, a warped echo that seemed to swirl back toward them. Panic began to creep in, subtle at first, then swelling like a storm. They were professionals, men trained to handle danger, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this. And then, as suddenly as it began, silence fell. Not the calm of night, but an oppressive, unnatural stillness that made their own breathing sound loud and foreign. The 4 officers and their horses vanished from the path, leaving behind only hoofprints that led into the fog and stopped abruptly, as though they had stepped off the edge of the world. When the town later sent search parties, the horses returned alone, skittish and drenched in sweat, yet the men themselves were gone. No struggle, no footprints beyond the clearing, no evidence of where they could have gone, just a lingering, unshakable sense that the fog had claimed them. The town erupted into chaos the moment the officers didn't return. Lanterns were grabbed, bells were rung, and search parties formed immediately, despite the heavy fog still clinging to every corner. Families huddled inside their homes, windows fogged with cold breath, listening for any sign of their missing protectors. Whispers ran through the streets. "They've been taken by the spirits of the old railway," some said. Others were more pragmatic, hoping for a simple misadventure, but the uneasy silence surrounding the foggy outskirts left even the most rational hearts pounding with fear. Searchers spread out, moving cautiously along the twisted tracks and into the dark forest that bordered the station. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping branch, made them jump. The fog seemed to shift in response to their movements, thickening whenever they approached an area where the officers might have been. Horses whinnied nervously, sensing danger that humans could not see. The searchers shouted the officers' names, but their voices came back muffled, distorted as if the fog were swallowing sound itself. Even dogs, trained for tracking, refused to advance past certain points, whining and pulling back toward safety. Rumors began to grow as the search continued through the night. Some claimed to see fleeting shadows dancing between the trees, pale shapes that moved too quickly to be human. Others swore they heard cries, low, hollow, impossible to place, that seemed to echo off the fog itself. One elderly resident claimed that decades ago, travelers had disappeared in the same area, swallowed by a living mist. Fear became contagious, infecting the townspeople as much as the cold. Families who had once joked about ghost stories now refused to speak above a whisper, fearful that the fog was listening. By the second day, desperation had taken hold. Volunteers combed the nearby fields, scoured the riverbanks, and crawled along the abandoned railway lines. Nothing. No footprints beyond the initial approach of the officers, no dropped equipment, no signs of struggle, only the lingering fog that seemed to recede slightly when searchers turned back, as if mocking their efforts. The journals and radios that were sent to communicate updates came back drenched, static-filled, or completely silent, further fueling suspicion that something unnatural had occurred. Town leaders called in additional support from neighboring areas, but even more experienced trackers were thrown off by the impenetrable gray that had swallowed the officers. By the third day, the search was fraying under the weight of exhaustion and fear. Families gathered around fires in town halls, recounting every memory, every rumor, hoping for a clue, any clue, that would bring the men back. Yet with each passing hour, the mystery deepened. The fog that had claimed the officers now seemed like a living entity, waiting, observing, hiding its secrets. It was as if the earth itself had conspired to erase their presence, leaving only anxious whispers, haunted eyes, and a growing legend that would terrify the town for generations to come. 100 years passed, and the memory of the vanished officers had slowly faded from national headlines, relegated to whispered stories in the town's pubs and libraries. But in 2018, the past clawed its way back to the surface. A construction crew, tasked with clearing overgrown brush near the abandoned railway station, unearthed a section of earth that didn't belong. The ground seemed unnaturally firm, almost preserved, and as they dug, their shovels struck wooden planks rotting beneath the soil. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The planks had been buried for decades, yet something about them suggested they were hiding something much older, something forbidden. As the workers pried open the planks, a hidden chamber emerged from the earth. Dust, mold, and the unmistakable scent of decay filled the air. Inside, the team found a collection of artifacts belonging to the missing officers: tarnished badges, cracked lanterns, and hats that had once been worn by the men. There were journals, some intact, others barely legible, and the pages seemed frozen in time. It was a chilling time capsule, untouched by humans for a century, as if the fog had carefully preserved it all. The air in the chamber was heavy, carrying a cold that seemed unnatural, pressing against every person who stepped inside. Historians and forensic teams were called immediately. They carefully documented each item, photographing and analyzing with extreme caution. The journals, in particular, revealed fragments of the officers' final hours. Some pages were smudged with age and moisture, yet the frantic handwriting spoke clearly of fear that had escalated to terror. Mentions of strange shapes, unnatural sounds, and a fog that seemed to move with intelligence were scattered throughout. One journal, in particular, detailed how the officers had thought they were following a trail, only to find themselves back where they started, as if the fog had looped space around them. Among the belongings were objects that seemed ordinary at first glance: pocket watches, compasses, even a set of keys. But they carried a strange weight, both physically and mentally, on those who handled them. Experts noted that the compasses spun wildly, refusing to settle, as though some invisible force warped reality itself. Every artifact exuded an aura of mystery, a silent scream that something beyond understanding had occurred here. The fog had not just consumed the officers. It had left a mark, an imprint on the very earth and objects they had carried, a century-old signature of its presence. The most chilling discovery, however, came in a corner of the chamber, almost hidden beneath the rubble, a crude carving on the wall, scratched deep into the wood. It depicted 4 figures surrounded by swirling lines, twisted shapes that resembled smoke or mist, with eyes that seemed to follow anyone who looked at them. Beside it were fragments of a journal entry, barely legible. "It waits. It knows. And we." The words cut off abruptly, leaving a haunting silence that echoed through the chamber. This hidden space, sealed for 100 years, held more than artifacts. It held a piece of the unknown, a frozen moment of terror that had finally been unearthed, and it would leave everyone who witnessed it questioning reality itself. The moment historians and investigators began examining the officers' journals, it became clear that these were no ordinary accounts. The handwriting, though faded in parts, conveyed a growing panic with every page. Early entries were methodical, detailing the officers' movements and observations with the precision of trained lawmen. But as they ventured deeper into the fog on that fateful night, the words grew erratic, hurried, and almost illegible in places. References to shapes that should not exist and sounds that carry through the air without origin painted a chilling picture of men witnessing something beyond comprehension. One officer wrote repeatedly about the fog itself, describing it as more than mist. He called it a living, breathing presence. It seemed to shift intentionally, creating false paths, looping them back to the same spot, and hiding things that should have been visible. Shadows within the fog would stretch and twist unnaturally, sometimes taking the shape of familiar faces or forms, only to vanish when looked at directly. The investigators noted how the officers' language shifted from rational observation to descriptions that resembled fevered hallucinations, a progression that made the journals feel like a psychological map of terror unfolding in real time. Another journal contained sketches, rough, yet terrifyingly precise, of shapes the officers had tried to describe. Long, winding forms that seemed to hover above the ground, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, twisting around the men as if testing their resolve. The pages were annotated with phrases like "it watches," "we are too slow," and "do not follow the whispers." Each sketch became more chaotic, with overlapping lines and frantic scrawls, reflecting a mind trapped in fear and confusion. Experts studying these images noted a recurring pattern. The shapes always seemed to converge toward a central point, the same area where the officers had vanished without a trace. One of the most disturbing entries revealed the officers' awareness that they were being observed. One wrote about hearing low murmurs in the fog, voices whispering things that were almost intelligible, drawing their attention away from safety. The words were foreign, yet vaguely familiar, as if they were memories they could almost remember. The officers attempted to follow or respond, but the fog distorted both sound and space, making them disoriented. It was clear from the journal that the men realized they were in a trap they could not escape, though the precise nature of that trap remained beyond their understanding. The final entries, fragmented and smudged, left the investigators with more questions than answers. One page ended mid-sentence. "It's not human, it knows we're," and the next page was torn, leaving only a smear of ink. The desperation and terror that poured from the journals were palpable, as though the fog itself had imprinted on the pages, capturing the essence of the officers' last moments. These writings provided the first real glimpse into what had occurred, a chilling testimony of a night where reality bent, fear ruled, and 4 men vanished into something that defied explanation, leaving nothing behind but cryptic words and a sense of lurking horror. Once the chamber and the journals were discovered, authorities wasted no time. Forensic teams, archaeologists, and paranormal experts were all called in, each eager yet apprehensive about what they might uncover. The chamber itself was meticulously mapped, measured, and scanned. Every artifact, from the officers' tarnished badges to the cracked lanterns, was carefully catalogued. Sensors were installed to detect changes in temperature, humidity, and electromagnetic fields. Almost immediately, investigators noticed something unusual. The chamber was unnaturally cold, far colder than the surrounding ground, and the air felt heavy, almost viscous, as though it resisted movement. Specialized instruments revealed even stranger anomalies. Compasses spun erratically, lights flickered without explanation, and electronic devices malfunctioned whenever they were brought inside. Soil samples from the floor showed chemical compositions that were not entirely natural. Scientists were baffled to find compounds normally found in fog at concentrations far higher than would ever occur in nature, levels capable of inducing hallucinations, disorientation, and acute fear in anyone exposed. The very environment of the chamber seemed to be a remnant of whatever had claimed the officers, as if the fog itself had imprinted on the earth and left a lingering, malevolent signature. Investigators also discovered faint traces of biological material. Nothing that could be matched to the officers' DNA or any known human presence, but something organic had existed there, a residue that suggested life had once moved through the space. Some experts speculated it could be remnants of microscopic organisms that thrived in extreme fog conditions. Others weren't so rational, whispering among themselves that perhaps the fog had been something sentient, an entity capable of manipulating perception and reality. Every day spent in the chamber seemed to heighten tension, as if the very walls watched and resisted human intrusion. The team also studied the journals alongside the physical evidence, attempting to correlate descriptions with measurable anomalies. Every page describing shapes that moved unnaturally or whispers in the fog corresponded to areas of the chamber where temperature dips or electromagnetic spikes were most pronounced. It was as if the officers' writings had predicted the conditions investigators were now experiencing, a chilling suggestion that the events of 1918 had left a tangible echo, trapped in both ink and soil. The more they investigated, the more it seemed the fog had been no ordinary weather phenomenon, but a phenomenon that could warp reality itself. Perhaps most unsettling were the subjective experiences of the modern team. Several members reported feeling sudden waves of dread when entering certain corners of the chamber, hearing faint whispers, or glimpsing shadows where no one should have been. Even seasoned scientists, trained to approach the unknown with logic, described moments of panic and vertigo. It became increasingly difficult to separate natural phenomena from psychological effects, and investigators began to suspect that the fog, or whatever force had claimed the offices, might still linger, leaving traces that could affect anyone who entered its domain. Every discovery only deepened the mystery, suggesting that the past had never truly let go of the night 4 officers vanished into the shadows. As news of the discovery spread, the story quickly captured the imagination of experts, historians, and armchair detectives alike. Theories about what had happened to the 4 officers in 1918 ran wild, each more unsettling than the last. Some believed the fog itself had been a natural phenomenon gone horribly wrong, a toxic, hallucinogenic mist caused by rare chemical reactions in the swampy areas near the railway. Yet no scientific explanation could fully account for the missing officers, the preserved chamber, and the strange anomalies recorded by modern investigators. Even skeptics had to admit that something extraordinary had occurred that night. Others suggested far darker possibilities. Paranormal researchers speculated that the fog was sentient, a malevolent force capable of manipulating time and space. Legends of the shadow mist, passed down in the region by Native American tribes, described spirits that could trap travelers in an endless gray realm, removing them from the physical world entirely. These myths eerily mirrored the officers' journals, which spoke of being watched, followed, and ultimately swallowed by something beyond human comprehension. To some, it seemed the officers had wandered into one of these supernatural traps, leaving only their belongings and frantic notes behind. Then there were those who leaned toward the extraterrestrial explanation. Certain fringe theorists argued that the fog had been a cloaking mechanism, a way to hide something or someone from human eyes. They pointed to the strange electromagnetic readings in the chamber and the inexplicable biological traces as proof that the night of 1918 had intersected with something not of this world. The idea that a thin veil between dimensions might have been pierced, however briefly, gave the story a chilling twist. The officers might have glimpsed, or even entered, a realm that defied all known laws of reality. Some historians sought rational explanations rooted in psychology and geography. They suggested the officers had become disoriented in a maze-like area of the railway, where the fog and twisted landscape triggered mass panic, hallucinations, and accidental death. While this theory addressed the psychological evidence in the journals, it failed to explain the modern anomalies: compasses spinning, electronic devices failing, and the extraordinarily preserved chamber. Even the most scientific minds were forced to admit that the events of that night could not be fully rationalized, leaving a lingering doubt that something more than mere misfortune had been at play. The speculation grew even more intense as investigators and journalists began piecing together every detail from the officers' notes, eyewitness accounts from 1918, and modern findings. Internet forums, podcasts, and local news shows buzzed with theories ranging from time slips to interdimensional predators. Each new theory seemed to stir the imagination further, creating a complex web of possibilities. One haunting idea persisted above all others. The fog had not merely hidden the officers, it had claimed them, leaving traces that still defied explanation a century later. Whatever the truth, the story had captured the world's attention, and no single theory could fully contain the horror and mystery of that fateful night. Even after a century, the area around the old railway station retained a sense of unease that locals could not shake. On foggy nights, townspeople reported fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures moving silently along the tracks, vanishing whenever someone tried to approach. Lights in abandoned buildings flickered inexplicably, and the air carried a damp, metallic scent reminiscent of the officers' final journal entries. For generations, the town had whispered of the fog that watches, and now, with modern investigations confirming strange phenomena, the stories seemed less like superstition and more like warnings encoded in history. Visitors and urban explorers drawn to the site often recounted unsettling experiences. Some claimed to hear low murmurs, almost like conversations taking place just beyond comprehension, while others reported sudden dizziness or panic as they stepped into certain areas of the old platform. Electronic devices malfunctioned, compasses spun wildly, and even cameras captured inexplicable distortions, blurs of gray shapes that did not correspond to anything physical. The railway, long abandoned and reclaimed by weeds, appeared to exist simultaneously in two states, part of the present world and part of a memory that refused to fade. Paranormal investigators who visited described moments of overwhelming dread, as though unseen eyes were tracking every movement. Some even claimed to see fleeting glimpses of 4 figures, tall, indistinct, and gliding through the mist. Whether these were echoes of the officers, projections of the fog itself, or hallucinations induced by lingering chemical anomalies, no one could say. The phenomena were unpredictable, intensifying in some areas while leaving others eerily calm, making it impossible to map or predict. Locals learned quickly. Approaching the station on foggy nights was asking for something unexplainable to follow you home. The mystery took on an almost living quality when researchers examined the environment scientifically. Sensors picked up unusual electromagnetic fluctuations that spiked without any identifiable source. Soil samples continued to show traces of the same anomalous compounds found in the preserved chamber, indicating that whatever had been active in 1918 might still leave echoes in the present. The fog itself appeared to linger longer than normal in the immediate vicinity, curling into shapes that looked unnervingly like figures in motion. It was as if the environment remembered the night the officers vanished and subtly reenacted it for anyone daring to observe. Even after extensive documentation, debates, and analyses, the true nature of what happened remained beyond human comprehension. Each new discovery only added layers to the enigma. The preserved chamber, the journals, the physical anomalies, the legends, and the eerie sightings that continued to this day. The town, once ordinary, had become a focal point of mystery, drawing curiosity seekers and investigators from around the world. And the fog, silent and impenetrable, continued to drift across the railway, a timeless reminder that some shadows, once claimed, never fully released their grip, leaving the world to wonder whether the officers had ever truly left, or if they had simply become part of something far larger, far darker, and far older than anyone could imagine. As the fog drifts silently over the abandoned railway, one question lingers in the minds of those who dare to remember. Did the officers truly vanish, or did they step into something that exists just beyond our world, waiting for the next soul to wander too close? The journals, the chamber, and the strange phenomena left behind are not just remnants of the past, they are warnings. 100 years have passed, yet the fog still moves, still watches, still remembers. Locals whisper that on nights when the mist is thick and the air feels unnaturally cold, you can glimpse shadows moving where no one should be. Lanterns flicker as though carrying messages from another time, and even the bravest souls feel the weight of unseen eyes following their every step. The officers may be gone, but their story is far from over. Their fate has become a part of the land itself, a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Perhaps one day, someone will step too far, too close to the fog, and understand what truly happened. Or perhaps the fog will simply wait, patient and silent, collecting its secrets and leaving only questions behind. What is certain is that the shadows of 1918 remain, intertwined with the mist, haunting the railway, and lingering in the imagination of anyone who dares to remember. So the next time you see a fog rolling in over the tracks, remember the 4 officers who rode into the mist and never returned. And know this, some shadows never let go.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.